Blaine Stephenson is our guest this morning. Blaine and I have gotten acquainted basically in the hallways of the church because Blaine's always been interested in words, vocabulary, phrases, and when I would preach, he would often ask me, how'd you come up with that, or what does that word mean, or I love that word, or I like that phrase. So naturally I was drawn to him because we both love words. And here's a guy who gets paid to talk. But he also loves the way communication works. And so I've asked him to come and tell his story and what he does and some ways that he uses words to build a platform for potential witness in his workplace. So welcome, Blaine Stephenson. Come share with us this morning.
Thank you. Oh. Wait till it's done, then you can decide if it's worthy of clapping or not. Roger, thank you. I've spent a lot of time in this room, and some of you might be with some of your kids and stuff like that. So I've worked with the senior high group for quite a few years, and this is the first time that I stopped volunteering with senior high. I kind of felt like I reached an age level where I'm not cool anymore, and I'm not connecting with the kids, and I'm like, there needs to be a younger generation coming in and connecting with those guys. And I've been going to Sunday school for the first time in my life in about 10 years with my wife, and I'm kind of like, who are you? And kind of getting reintroduced, trying to see if I'm going to re-up on the contract, whoever said that. But my approach with the kids here, just to kind of set that up a little bit before I get into myself and what we're going to talk about, is I would kind of take them from 9th grade up to 12th grade in this room here, and they were about to go off to college. And I would spend half of the time in the Bible talking about God, and the other half just talking about life, practical, real-world examples of like what college is going to be like, what you need to do. We would talk about money and finances and preparing for that. And funny thing about words is I had a theme. I'd give them a word for the day, and it was some kind of esoteric word or antithesis or something like that. And it was just kind of a fun way to kind of get some things going, fancy ways to say stuff. But I got a text from one kid that's, I think he's in the engineering program in Nebraska, and he texted me in the middle of one of his classes, and he goes, my teacher just said esoteric, and I knew exactly what he meant. I think I was the only one that knew that. And I'm like, so if your kids didn't learn about Jesus, they learned some fancy words from me and stuff. So it's funny when you're amongst men. The first thing is everyone kind of sizes you up and says, who are you and what do you do for a living, right? And the who are you and what do you do for a living, the what do you do for a living kind of says, where's your social status, where's your knowledge base, where's your influence, where's your power and stuff like that. But I want to kind of get to the journey of how I ended up where I'm at, and Roger kind of framed it up. I'll tell you kind of where I am right now. I work for a company called Medtronic, and they invented the pacemaker. I can't remember if it was Ron or someone just joked with you, or Dean, you said, like, you might have some customers in here. I don't know. So, but I work at the Mounds View campus. It's the world headquarters for our heart division. And as I say that, I can't believe I work for that place, because as you hear my journey of how I got there, I'll just say this. If you got kids that you're not sure what they're doing in college or where they're at, you hear my story and you're going to go, there's hope for them. That's about it. But what I do there at work, and again, I'll get more into the details, is my job is to train sales reps. And I train them how to have conversations with physicians. And it sounds simple. You just say your product, how it helps a patient out. But there's a whole lot of layers in the hospital system and in the hospital environment, and how to connect with physicians, how to say what your solution is, develop needs and all that. And my job is to train sales reps how to have conversations, how to connect, how to earn the right to ask for the business. And I'm going to get to that in a second. My background, my family, my wife Kelly, we've been married 25 years, so we keep re-upping the contract. And she is definitely the glue and the foundation of our family. She is our prayer warrior. I always think when stuff is going good in our family, it's because she's kind of the one that does that. I'm the one that likes to dig into the Bible and the details and dig into apologetics and G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis and Ravi Zacharias. That's kind of my bent. I got 3 kids. It's funny where they're at now, and if you guys know raising kids, man, that is a journey. I could probably spend an hour just talking about my failures and mess-ups in that arena. But my oldest right now is a senior at Northwestern. Having a lot of fun with him because he's dad is now smarter. And I used to be a kind of a dumb guy about 5 years ago. And I think Mark Twain said, from the age of 20 to 25, Mark Twain said, it's incredible in those 5 years how smart my dad has become. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. But helping him with his resume, his cover letter, interview skill sets, and he's really looking to me for guidance. And that has not always occurred. And excited about that. My daughter Mariah is at Bethel. She's a junior. Oh, my son is majoring in marketing. And I'll say this, thankfully he's in college. I wasn't sure, like, is he heading to college or not? Where's he going? Daughter's a junior at Bethel. She's an athletic trainer, so if you need your ankle taped or something like that, she can take care of that for you. And she's coming home this weekend to, again, work on her resume, practicing interview skill sets and things like that. That was another thing I did with the senior high guys is in about 4 years, this happens every time, they come back and say, Blaine, can you help me with a resume? I love doing that pragmatic, practical stuff. I help them with interviews, help them with their resumes. How do they get started on that first step? But that's what I'm going to be doing with my daughter this weekend. Sounds like an exciting weekend, doesn't it? And then my youngest, Marcus, is a senior in high school at Rosemount. That's where we live. And he is looking at going to a place called Grand Canyon University in Phoenix. Man, I love the price of that thing. Because he said to me, we're here, and he goes, I say, hey, where do you want to go to school? And I'm thinking about our budget, and he goes, I want to go somewhere south. And I was like, Mankato State. That's about as far south as we're going. So, but Grand Canyon University, I was jogging around Lake Harriet, bumped into a guy from Grace Church that I grew up with. Haven't seen him in, has to be 25 years. He goes, my kids are going to Grand Canyon University. Googled it, saw the price of it, private Christian institution. It's warm. And I'm pretty excited for him on that. Just the influence that could potentially have in his life and how that'll impact him. But that's the kids. My background, from a work standpoint, and this is where it starts, I'm the son of a garbage man. And I work for Medtronic in the heart division. That's a little scary. My dad's a garbage man, and I always laugh because I remember growing up in church and us kids would be there, and the pastor would always say, and Jesus even loves the garbage man. I'd look over at my dad, and I'm like, all right, I guess we're in, you know. And we would crack up at that. To this day, no joke, that was my favorite job as a kid. I was working mechanical stuff, and I was a kid, and I'm lifting things, and I didn't know anything that this was a low job, you know, garbage work and stuff like that. I loved it. Do you guys remember 16-ounce glass bottles of Pepsi? 8-carton kind of cardboard thing? I could never finish it, but I remember just getting that 16-ounce bottle of Pepsi. We'd stop for a Big Mac at lunch, and I could never quite finish the last couple bites. But to this day, that was my favorite job. It's hanging out with my dad, you know, fun stuff. But from there, I went to Normandale Junior College, and which is funny there is I went to junior college and I went to Mankato State, and I squeezed 4 years of college into 6. So, and what's funny is at work, I'm at tables with people from Yale, Harvard, name the Ivy League schools, and I'm like, I don't belong here. These are brilliant minds in the world that I'm sitting with. But my calling card is I make the complex simple. I sit with these engineers, and I know how to translate their message into bite-sized chunks that we can communicate to hospitals and physicians to drive business and drive results for patients, and that's my calling card. But this will tell you where you have hope for your kids. I went to Normandale because I had no idea what to do, and back then I worked at a grocery store, and you could pay for college back then. And the reason it took me 6 years is sometimes I had money for 7 credits, sometimes for 10, sometimes full time, 12 credits, 15 credits. I remember going to Normandale, this is no lie, and I'm almost nervous that this is going on video. A guy said to me, what's your GPA? Guess what I said to him? I said, what's a GPA? What's a GPA? Because in high school, you make A honor roll, B honor roll. I didn't know about rankings and GPAs. That is where I started from. Again, my dad was a garbage man. Nobody went to college. There we go. Yeah. What's a GPA? And but through that, just kind of figured that out. The way I ended up at Mankato State, because that was the only school I could afford. And I went business degree because I was like, I can't change majors. I don't have the money for it. We're just going to go for it. First job out of college, I was selling a product called Banquet. I was making $18,000 a year, and I had a company car, and I thought I was living high on the hog. I couldn't believe that I was making that. I was making money. What's funny is my kids see me now where I'm at, and my oldest especially is like, I can't. I'm like, I came from a place. You know, he doesn't know. I tell him about the journey, but he just can't quite see it. And I'm like, listen, we're doing entry-level steps. You're going to get there. But I was making 18 grand a year, and had a company car, and I sold a product called Banquet Pot Pies. You guys remember TV dinners? Anybody remember Banquet Pot Pie? Banquet Pot Pies, the joke was we couldn't say chicken pot pie. We had to say pot pie with chicken because there wasn't enough chicken in the pot pie to say chicken first. Otherwise, that'd be false marketing and advertising. So that started my career in sales. And from there, it's a God thing, because I wasn't one of these that had my career mapped out. I was just kind of like, things opened up. Someone called me up. I heard you're good at what you do. Next thing you know, I got a call from a company called Kimberly-Clark. They sold drapes and gowns into the hospital system. I didn't know what a drape and gown was. I didn't know you sold to hospital systems. I didn't know medical device sales was out there. My son asked me again, he goes, how did you get into this medical sales thing? I said, I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know this world was out here. I didn't know the business world. I didn't know any of this stuff. It just happened along as I was going, and that got me into medical sales. It got me calling on the hospitals all out here. It got me into Mayo Clinic. And I just happened to, I'm a firm believer of just putting your time in, learning, focused and driven. And I got something in me that's just a drive to learn, to study on the weekends, study in evenings, that I'm going to learn this business. Kimberly-Clark, I went to Johnson & Johnson Ethicon Endosurgery. That got me actually into surgeries. And if you can name the top brain surgeons in the world, heart surgeons, I've worked with them. And it's just putting that time in. And then I eventually, Medtronic opened up. For us in the medical industry, it's not just, hey, I work at Medtronic. It's like a destination. It's a goal we try to get to sometimes. It's the world's largest medical device company in the world. Earl Bakken, our founder, just passed away this year. He invented the pacemaker. And that started a whole bunch of different companies and stuff like that. And I'm now I started off in the neuromodulation division, working with spine and pain and neurons and stuff. And then I got into the heart division, which is where I'm now, and it's diagnostics and monitoring. We have a heart monitor. It monitors arrhythmias, look for pause, brady, tachy, AFib. And we diagnose, and then people say, what do you do for a living? I go, I save lives. Because we find arrhythmias, and we save lives because we give people pacemakers and stuff. It's a fun little conversation starter. But the reason I give that journey is just a couple things. God opened up doors for me. It was people reaching out to me, and I didn't see it. I didn't even know it existed. Medtronic opened up because a buddy called me up and says, we got an opening. I'd like to take a look at you. And it got me in that door. And a couple things with that. Once I got to Medtronic, and I want to get into how in these work environments did I build a platform of connection and the ability to give counsel, to witness, and to do those things. Interesting thing at Medtronic was they hire some pretty sharp people. Not Normandale Mankato guy. I don't know how I slipped in through the side door. But I just saw people that knew things more than I did. Leadership at high levels. And I remember partnering with certain people to say, I want to learn what they have. And I sought them out. And I was fortunate enough, there was a regional vice president, happens to live in Lakeville, won the NCAA championship in hockey with Wisconsin, got drafted by the North Stars, played hockey in Europe. And I would meet with him once every other week. We'd meet at the Caribou on Apple Valley here, or we'd stop at Noodles or stuff like that. and he would coach and mentor me. And he allowed me to give him counsel, which I was shocked at. But we would sit down, we'd talk about our families, we'd talk about how we're doing in our marriage, what are we doing with our kids, how are we leading, how are we casting a vision for our family. And then we would talk about books we were reading. I picked up reading at the age of 40. And I always have, since that time, about 5 books going at the same time. I can't tell you how many leadership books, communication books, behavioral economics, heuristics and biases, and all that stuff of how do we communicate. And that's what I'm really focused in on as far as what I do for work. But we would talk about the books we're reading, and then we would talk about how are we building culture? How are we building vision on his team across the country? And then I eventually would meet with the VP of sales, and we would talk about, and the general manager, how are we casting vision globally? And then I had the opportunity to go to Europe, train the teams there. The Middle East, I've worked with Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and we didn't meet in Iran and Iraq. We would meet in Turkey. But we'd have that whole team in Japan and Australia and things like that. And so the reason I'm just bringing that up is I went from what is a GPA to being able to have global impact and influence with Medtronic, a company that, I didn't know existed. But what I wanted to get to is I always say it's not what you do that matters. It's how do you do at what you do. Because God calls us to different areas. Sometimes I think when I was selling banquet pot pies, I almost think I did a better job at connecting, witnessing, building bridges than I do now. I look at that sometimes. Did I do better then? Because that's how God looks at it. God is putting us in different positions, and how do we do, not what do we do, how do we do at what we do? Does that make sense? A couple things I just wanted to highlight, and I want to get into some practical application things. 2 things, still introduction on myself, 2 things I'm working on for me and my Christian faith. 2 areas right now. Apologetics. I'm studying that stuff like crazy. Ravi Zacharias has got 3 books out there. I've read them all 3 times. Take notes on it because I want to be conversational. Matter of fact, Brian here in our Sunday school class, remember, was that 2 or 3 years ago? I think I said to you, I want to figure this out. Do you remember that? And I was like, I cannot defend the faith. 25 years ago, I used to be able to say things like, hey, it says in the Bible, and people were like, what do you mean, this book of mythology? And I'm like, no, it's the word, it's truth. And I was like, I couldn't defend it. Jesus was a mythological figure and stuff like that. And I was like, man, the platform has shifted. I got to figure out how to connect on this. And I'll just say this, especially at Medtronic, a lot of these engineers and doctors, you know what their background is? Biology, evolution, and millions of years of evolution. I'm like, I do not know how to play on this platform and have this discussion. And so I think it was about 3 years ago, I said, I'm gonna figure this thing out. The ability to defend your faith. And it's to me, apologetics, the foundation of it is your worldview. What is your worldview? And everything transcends from that. And apologetics is being able to, in my opinion, defend your faith using logic, reasoning, facts, objective empirical evidence. And that's how I look at it. Instead of, I just heard God's voice and I believe in blind faith. And I'm like, man, there is so much evidence out there. It's not a posse of evidence. It's the overwhelming evidence that's out there. And it's not rather that there's not enough evidence. It's a suppression of the evidence that I think is in people's heart. It's a rejection of the evidence. And apologetics does not save somebody. It clears the path so I can have a discussion. And so what I talk about there, just to go off on a tangent here, is I talk about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. In your worldview, fill in those buckets, and let's have a discussion. I'll stop there because that's a whole nother discussion. That's something that I did with the 12th graders too, preparing them for college. to say you're going to be challenged in this realm. Let me prepare you with objective empirical evidence to handle that discussion. Especially in the field I'm in, I had a manager from Johnson & Johnson. We would connect, and I remember he was my boss, and he said, Blaine, I just can't believe in this Jesus thing, this faith thing. And I'm like, oh, there's evidence. Because in the medical field, we always talk about clinical studies, randomized controlled trials, blind and double-blind studies, level 1 studies, not a white paper or a level 5 study. He goes, I need evidence. I'm like, there is evidence. And he became a Christian through some books I gave him, Dr. Don Byerly, Surprised by Faith, and Letters from a Skeptic. I think it's Dr. Boyd. And those 2 books, and a doctor in Michigan. And I remember him saying, I'm a Christian. But there was a lot that went into that. But that's one area I've really been focusing on. And the second area, just for me personally, that I'm focused on is praying for my enemies. People at work that maybe they don't mean it, but I feel like they're against me, or people in life. And I'm like, man, I've been working on it. I'm in my 50s, and I'm finally working on it. I'm like, God, I pray you would bless that person's socks off. Give them a good day. Help them discover you. Help them. Sometimes I got to pray for the same person 5 times because my heart's not right. True. I always think about when Jesus woke up early in the morning, went to the mountains, what did he do? Who was he praying for? The disciples and this, that? No. I think he was praying for the Pharisees. Man, God, let them see. Open up their eyes. I think he was praying for his enemies. Along with, because it's easy for me to pray for my wife. Lord, bless our marriage. Watch out for my kids. Help them to find you. Help them to be in the world. That's easy. We all do it. But what I've been working on lately is trying to pray for my enemies with my heart. Sometimes I do it through my teeth. That's all right. I'm fake it till you make it, I guess. But those are 2 areas for me that I'm kind of working on. One last thing, because we're talking about work, there's a lot of different things. I have a couple guiding work philosophies. Maybe you guys have them as well. Just 3 things that I try to do in my work. This isn't a Christian type thing. This is something that I teach the kids in the high school group. But one of my sayings is a problem precisely defined is already partially solved. You ever get in a meeting and people say, I think we should do this, let's do that. And I'm like, whoa. Let's clearly define the problem. Let's look at it from every angle, and the solutions start to appear. And I try to slow a meeting down. That's just one thing I've always carried with me throughout my career, whether it was banquet pot pies or working with physicians in Japan in the heart division. Second thing is, when I'm working with people, I heard this from a general manager, assume positive intent. Assume positive intent. That has helped me so much. It sounds so simple. Because you get in conflicts in meetings. It can get hot as well. But in my back of my mind, I'm like, they're trying to figure out the solution too. I'm going to assume positive intent, that it's not a personal attack. I have to do that myself. I got to think about that. And my third thing is this. At work and with different workers, it's so easy to point out the negative. And it's so easy to get into that little gossip train. Oh, this person, blah, that. And I heard this from the executive vice president. He says, Blaine, we're going to evangelize the bright spots. I heard that from Tony Dungy's book, The Mentor Leader. When he took over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they did not have much going on. And he says, we're going to find tangible evidence of something positive, and that is going to be a platform that we're going to work for the next positive thing and the next positive thing. And so evangelize the bright spots. These are just 3 themes when it comes to work for me of how I do things. But specific to my job, and coaching reps, and it translates into how do I build bridges? Because one thing I wanted to just kind of say is Roger gave me a couple of themes of what to kind of talk on, and I saw 3 words, because I said to Roger, I said, hey, do you want me to talk about how I witness? Sometimes I can. A lot of times recently, doors are really shut. The societal, political environment we're in has really shut some doors. And I'm still learning what's the right approach to say things. It's a real different environment right now. And I will say this on the political realm. I don't like to get into the political discussion. I could win a battle on that, but you lose the war. God and his government supersedes all of this little stuff. Do you have a gun? Do you not have a gun? Do you build a wall, not build a wall? I don't care. I do. I live in America and I got kids and stuff like that, but God's government is going to I don't know how long this U.S. Constitution and government is going to be around. Is it going to be gone in 200 years, 300 years? I don't know. And when you travel, get an opportunity to travel the globe, you see there's a lot of different governments out there and stuff like that. And to be able to have this discussion of God at a higher level and say, I'm not going to even go down those roads. Let's talk about stuff that really matters. But Roger said something, he goes, talking about wisdom, and he says, preparing a platform of witness and counsel. And he said, Blaine, don't get into how to witness and how to counsel, but how do you prepare that platform? What goes into it that someone says, I'm going to listen and open up to what you have to say? This is exactly, it's behavioral economics, and it's what I teach our sales reps to get a doctor to open up and say, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm doing, and you start having these discussions, open discussions. And here's the key characteristic. We teach in our group anatomy, physiology, clinical studies, technology. Here's how you sell the technology. Here's competition. Here's the business and insurers and reimbursement and relative value units and how physicians get paid and how the hospital system works. But there's one characteristic, I'll say this, in a successful sales rep. It's by Harvard Business Review. There's actually two, but there's one that really stands out. One characteristic in successful sales reps, no matter the industry. Matter of fact, for a doctor to build their business, there's one characteristic that drives their business. And this same characteristic, in a study out of Baylor, it lowered a doctor's chance of getting a lawsuit. And it's one characteristic. What do you guys think it is? Honesty, trust, focus, listening. The key character, here's the thing, got to have all of them, but there's one that stood out. It was empathy. People, when they think of sales, they think, oh, you're a good talker, you're good. No. Really good sales reps listen. They seek to understand. I'm trying to figure out, I tell sales reps, I want you to understand the mental heuristics of a doctor, how they view a patient, how they see things, why do they do what they do. And we train them, they drink from a fire hose, we have them in for about a week and a half out of 3 months of different training things, and I go, if you're totally lost with a doctor, or they surprise you, come out of a surgery suite, and you're like, this is the key doctor I've been trying to get to, and I have no idea what to do. I said, lead with empathy, and you'll almost never lose. Just say, I want to get to know you. I want to understand how you're doing things. Become part of the fabric of that practice, and you lead with empathy. And I said, it's as simple as saying, doctor, could I ask you some questions? Help me understand, what are your thoughts on, right? Tell me more. Here's the thing with building a bridge for me with people at work, you know what I do? Lead with empathy. People don't want to hear anything that I got to say, right? What's the saying? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and all those kind of sayings. That's empathy. But it's an authentic, genuine interest. I have a genuine interest in people. Second thing that I do from a pragmatic standpoint is this. We're in meetings. Roger, it's funny how we get together in the hallways. You know where my best meetings are at Medtronic? In the hallway. Bumped by the VP of sales, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Here's an idea. And he goes, yeah, I kind of like that. People are more transparent and open in the hallways and stuff like that. But I do this specifically at work, and it's authentic. These aren't manipulative things. There's ways to do this stuff to be manipulative, and I don't teach or coach that. I always say you got to be authentic in what you're doing and be honest and straightforward. I break bread. I call it I break bread. I'm like, I get together with a marketer. Maybe we had some conflict in a meeting. I'm like, hey, can we grab a coffee? And then they want to talk about what we're working on and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, give me your background. How'd you end up here? People love to tell their story. And you know what? I'm genuinely interested in it. Tell me about your family. Tell me what you're doing. I'm at a point now in the division that I'm in. I'm the old guy. And I got people coming in. They're just a little bit older than my kids. It's a weird dynamic. So I don't say, like, tell me about your kids and your marriage. They don't have that yet, you know. But I remember what it was like because I came from a place, and I'm like, hey, where are you headed with your career and stuff? So I lead with empathy. I break bread. Third thing, especially the younger ones, but I invest in their jobs, I invest in their career and in their success. I call sales reps on the phone across the country, and I help them with their jobs, I help them with their careers, I invest in them. It's so easy to be selfish and talk about moving my agenda forward and stuff. That's easy to do, we're kind of built that way. But I've had more success when I'm like invested in them. I've helped people with LinkedIn. What do they need to do? What does it look like? I always say to the reps when they come in, I go, do you want to be employed or employable? If you listen to what I'm saying and take some of these teachings, you'll be employable. And I try to help people out with where they're headed. That's why with empathy, I'm trying to find out where are they going, what are they doing, what can I do? I have a team of 10 field sales trainers across the country. Try to get on calls with them once a month or so, and we talk about business and this and that, but then I talk about how do I help them with their resumes. I go, if you partner with me and you're on my team, I go, I guarantee your resume is going to change. You're going to have national and global impact when you say things, because I will meet with the people that, based on your feedback, I'm always investing in them. Another thing that's easy to do, and a lot of people miss this is my fourth thing that I do. I'm in meetings. I'm in meetings with the VP of sales, executive vice presidents, different things, and they'll mention a sales rep across the country. I really like what this person is doing. And that sales rep out in Florida, California, has no idea their name was mentioned. And remember how I said evangelize the bright spots? I'll call that rep up after the meeting, and I'll just go, hey, do you know what? Your name was mentioned by the VP of sales. They're like, what? Yeah, we're trying to figure out what you're doing, how you're doing it, and we want to learn. Called one guy up one time, I'll never forget this. John, and he was in Indiana. John, how's it going? Blaine, he goes, my car just got broken into, and I got to go meet with the doc, and the windshield's busted, this and that. And I go, I'll call you back. He goes, no, what do you got? I said I was with the executive vice president and another district manager, and we were debating who's the best rep in the country. And I said, you were part of that pool. And he goes, oh. And just being encouraging, finding the good stuff, and connecting, and being open and transparent. One last thing that I try to do, and I'm straightforward with it, is I share my life. Do you share your life with people? It's easy. It's not like I'm trying to tell someone about Jesus or try to connect. Like, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Man, 12th grade group. I was talking to these kids about finances. Really? Yeah, at my church. At your church? You're talking about finance, kids? Yeah. I got to throw Jesus in there now and then. But I was talking to these kids about what does it mean to save money and things like that, because I'm trying to figure out ways to talk their language and stuff. I just share my life. Just pretty open about it, and then they reciprocate. It opens up. Those are ways that just some simple things that I try to do to connect. And how do we just get that discussion going? And I lead with empathy. They know I'm there to help them, and I honestly am. I look for authentic ways to connect, not just connect to get my way, but authentic ways to connect. Interesting thing, and then Roger, I'll pass it off to you, is Tom Brady, who's going to be in the Super Bowl for the umpteenth time, the GOAT. I heard a story, I think it was on ESPN or something like that, I can't remember where I heard it, but his high school coach still calls him up. He takes his call, think about this, Tom Brady, whose brain on football is above everything, he has the top leaders and coaches, and they said, you take the call from your high school coach. Why? You know what he said? He's on my side. You want to prepare a platform to give counsel? Be on their side. Let them know I'm here for your success, your career, wherever they're headed. I'm on your side. Roger,
Wow, Blaine, thank you. Thank you, brother. Wow, that's wisdom. I mean, did you hear Proverbs just bleeding through all of that? You know, when Proverbs talks about pride, Proverbs talks about words and listening. Thank you, Blaine. We normally would pay you about $10,000 for that speech, but instead we will just honor you. Thank you for that. Is that just practical or what? I mean, that's fantastic stuff. You have a little lizard on this card, and that lizard represents the fact that lizards are found in kings' palaces. We just found one. And you are one. And wouldn't you love for your son to be in a high school class with a guy like Blaine? Did you know that was going on in this room? We've got volunteers and people investing in our young people like Blaine and a host of really classy women as well. Well, I won't repeat his talk, but I just think about all the things that he said, and we want to give you a couple of ways to talk about this around your table. So we've got some questions for you. Remember, this is building the platform, and I think he did such a great job of saying, this gets to the most important thing, but we have to earn the right first. So here's a couple questions. Share a time when someone said or did something that put wind in your sails. Tell your own story. And then the second question, what's a tangible or practical thing you can do to prepare a platform that will open up the opportunity to witness or counsel? Those are two challenging questions. Let's talk amongst yourselves for a few minutes together.